I stood alone beneath a sky the color of ash, my black dress clinging to my skin as the wind from the cemetery whipped through the trees. The priest's voice had faded, the mourners had gone, but the silence stayed, thick and merciless. My mother's coffin was the only thing left between me and the world. No father, no brother, no one. Just me, Harper Dawson, and the woman who had loved me more than anyone else ever would. As I turned to leave, heels sinking into the wet ground, I heard soft footsteps behind me. A woman in black, her face veiled, stood just a few feet away. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Your mother asked me to give you this," she said. "You'd need it when she was gone." Then she pressed a small velvet box into my hand and whispered, "It will change everything you think you know." The wind howled across the empty cemetery, dragging the scent of rain and cut grass. I couldn't feel my fingers. They were frozen around a single white lily. I placed it on the coffin lid and whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." My voice cracked. There was no echo, only silence. Everyone had promised they'd come. My father, Robert, said he'd try to make it. My brother Mason texted a half-hearted, "Sorry, busy." Even my coworkers sent polite excuses. So here I was, one daughter standing over a grave while the rest of the world kept spinning. I waited until the funeral home workers finished lowering the casket. One of them, a kind old man named Harold, gave me a pitiful smile. "You did good, miss. She'd be proud." "Thank you," I managed, though the words barely left my throat. When the hearse drove away, the cemetery fell silent again. My heels sank deeper into the mud, trapping me in place. I should have left, but something kept me there, as if walking away would mean letting her go for good. Then I heard it. The slow click of heels on gravel. I turned. A woman dressed in black approached through the mist. Her face was hidden behind a dark veil, her gloves spotless despite the damp. She moved with the kind of confidence that didn't belong in a cemetery. "Can I help you?" I asked cautiously. She stopped a few feet away, studying me through the veil. "You're Harper Dawson?" I nodded. My heart started to pound. "She wanted you to have this." The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box tied with a white ribbon. "Your mother made me promise to give it to you only when she was gone." I took it hesitantly. The box was heavier than it looked. "Who are you?" Her lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "Just someone who owed your mother a debt." Before I could ask another question, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking steadily until she vanished into the fog. I looked down at the box in my palm. It was deep crimson velvet, slightly worn at the corners. My thumb brushed over the ribbon. It was tied with meticulous care, the way my mother used to wrap gifts when I was a child. Inside the box, I could feel something shifting, a faint metallic clink. A piece of jewelry, maybe. A ring? A key? I glanced back toward the path, but the mysterious woman was gone. A chill ran through me. I slipped the box into my coat pocket, whispered one last goodbye, and turned toward the car. I didn't know it then, but that small box, the one my mother left for me, would unravel everything I thought I knew about her, about our family, and about the lies that had built the world I was standing in. Back in my apartment, the silence felt heavier than the rain outside. I set the crimson velvet box on the kitchen table and just stared at it, the ribbon gleaming faintly under the yellow light. My fingers hovered above it for a long time. Part of me was terrified to open it, as if doing so would make Mom's death feel real. Finally, I took a deep breath and pulled the ribbon loose. The lid creaked slightly. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small gold locket. The paper was old, the edges soft and yellowed, the handwriting immediately recognizable, elegant, curved, and steady. "Harper, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But there are things you never knew, things I couldn't tell you while I was alive. Go to the address written below. It's time you learned the truth." At the bottom was an address, 17 Ocean View Lane, Kennebunkport. My heart lurched. Kennebunkport, the same place my father used to disappear to for his so-called business trips. "What truth?" I whispered to the empty room. I lifted the locket. It was warm, as if it had been waiting for me. On the front, 2 letters were engraved. E. M. Evelyn Monroe? My mother's name was Evelyn Dawson. I had never heard of Monroe. When I opened the locket, I expected to find a photograph. Instead, there was a tiny key tucked behind the frame with a strip of tape. A key, but to what? I pressed it into my palm and stared at the note again. The address pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat. I tried to distract myself, made tea, scrolled through my phone, but nothing worked. I couldn't stop thinking about that woman in black. Who was she? How did she know my mother? The hours stretched. By midnight, I was pacing the living room, reading and rereading the note. Finally, I gave in. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and the box, and placed them gently in my bag. Before I left, I stopped at the dresser and looked at the framed photo of Mom and me on my college graduation day. Her smile looked so calm, so proud, as if there were no secrets behind it. "Why didn't you just tell me, Mom?" I whispered. "What were you hiding?" Outside, the storm had quieted. The city lights flickered off the wet streets as I drove out of Portland. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark, the sea wind growing colder the closer I got to Kennebunkport. Whatever waited for me at that address, I had a feeling it wouldn't be closure. It would be a beginning, one my mother had planned long before her last breath. Kennebunkport greeted me with fog and salt wind. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you've stepped into someone else's dream. My GPS beeped once and went silent as I pulled onto a narrow road hugging the coastline. The ocean thundered below, waves slamming against the cliffs. Then I saw it, the cottage from my mother's note. It stood alone on a bluff, small and gray, its white shutters beaten by years of sea storms. The mailbox read E.M., painted in fading gold. My heart thudded. Evelyn Monroe. I parked, my boots crunching over gravel as I approached the porch. The key from the locket trembled in my hand as I slid it into the rusted lock. With a soft click, the door creaked open. Inside smelled of sea salt, dust, and something faintly floral, lavender, my mother's favorite scent. The air was thick with memories I didn't recognize. Every surface told a story. Framed sketches of jewelry designs, boxes of gemstones, half-finished pendants laid carefully on a workbench. There were photographs too, dozens of them. My mother, younger, glowing, standing beside a sign that read, Monroe Designs Jewelry Studio. In one picture, she posed with a man I didn't know. They stood close, laughing. My chest tightened. I walked deeper into the cottage, my fingers trailing over glass cases filled with elegant, handcrafted jewelry. So, this was what she had hidden, a past far more brilliant than the life she'd lived in Portland. On the old oak table lay an envelope addressed to me. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Harper, if you're reading this, you've found where it all began and ended. Before I was your mother, I was Evelyn Monroe. I built Monroe Designs from nothing, only to have it stolen from me by people I trusted most. When I started over, I swore I'd never let you near that darkness. But now, you must know. Inside the envelope were documents, property deeds, bank statements, company records, and one line that stopped my breath. Monroe Designs was never destroyed. It was taken by Robert Dawson and his partner. My father. I dropped the papers. My knees nearly gave out. My mother hadn't just left her career behind, she'd been betrayed. A floorboard creaked behind me. My pulse spiked. "Who's there?" I called out, spinning toward the doorway. A shadow moved, tall, deliberate, familiar. Then, a voice I knew better than my own heartbeat. "Nice place, isn't it?" My brother, Mason, stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, a smirk on his lips. "How did you find me?" I whispered. He stepped into the light. "Dad told me you'd come here eventually." And just like that, the air turned cold again, not from the sea, but from the danger standing right in front of me. Mason looked completely out of place in the weathered cottage, city-polished shoes, sinking slightly into the dusty floorboards. Designer coat still smelling of cologne and rain. He smiled the same practiced smile that once charmed teachers, neighbors, and girlfriends alike. "Didn't think Mom had such good taste," he said, glancing around at the jewelry sketches on the wall. "Guess she had a whole secret life you knew nothing about." I folded my arms. "How did you find me, Mason?" He shrugged. "Dad called. Said you'd been snooping around. Thought I'd come make sure you don't get us in trouble." "Us?" I scoffed. "You didn't even come to her funeral." His jaw tightened for a moment, but the smirk returned. "I had meetings, Harper. Real life doesn't stop because someone dies. She wasn't just someone." He ignored the sting in my voice and wandered over to the work table. "So this is it, Monroe Designs. You know, Dad said she stole this place from him? I froze. That's a lie. Mason turned, resting his hands on the table's edge. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Mom built something using Dad's money, then ran off when he wanted his share. My chest tightened. She built this long before him. He took it everything she had, every design she ever drew. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. God, you sound just like her, always the victim. Dad tried to keep the family together. She's the one who left. That's not true, I said, voice shaking now. I read her letters. I saw the documents. She was betrayed. Mason by both of them. Then prove it, he snapped. Otherwise, all this, he gestured to the jewelry, the documents, goes back where it belongs to the Dawson family. Split 50-50. I stared at him, disgust mixing with disbelief. You're unbelievable. She's barely in the ground, and you're already dividing her ghosts. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Listen, Harper, you're not cut out for this kind of money. You'll screw it up, and Dad will clean up after you like always. Something in me snapped. I pushed the papers toward him. You think you're entitled to everything just because you share a last name? She chose me. She trusted me. He leaned in, smirk fading. Don't make me remind you who runs this family. Runs it? I laughed bitterly. You and Dad ran it straight into the ground. For a second, the air between us was razor thin. His hand twitched, not quite a threat, not quite restraint. Then he straightened his coat, smoothed his hair, and forced a grin. This isn't over, Harper. You'll realize sooner or later everything she owned is ours. Always was. He walked out into the fog without another word. When the door shut behind him, I felt the house exhale as if it, too, had been holding its breath. I picked up the crumpled documents and pressed them against my chest. Mom's voice echoed in my memory. They took everything from me once, Harper. Don't let them take it again. That's when I knew Mason wasn't done. And neither was I. The storm rolled in from the sea that night, howling through the cracks of the old cottage like a warning. I couldn't sleep. Mason's words kept replaying in my mind, twisting my thoughts into knots. I needed proof, something that could silence him and Dad forever. I tore through every drawer, every box, every inch of the cottage. I found receipts, sketches, contracts, but no confession, no letter explaining how it all went wrong. My flashlight flickered as thunder rattled the windows. Then, when I pulled open the bottom drawer of Mom's old dresser, the wood caught halfway jammed. I tugged harder, and the back panel shifted. Behind it, hidden under a false bottom, was a leather-bound book. It smelled of sea salt and thyme. My mother's handwriting filled the first page. Neat, elegant, heartbreakingly familiar. If anyone ever finds this, it means the truth couldn't stay buried forever. My throat tightened as I flipped to the next page. Robert Dawson and I started Monroe Designs together. I created every piece, every design. But once the business grew, he changed. He and his partner forged documents, transferred ownership behind my back. When I confronted him, he said the company was his, that I was just the woman who polished the silver. My hands trembled. When I threatened to go public, he laughed. Then he locked me out of the accounts, left me with nothing. Pregnant, alone. I took my mother's last name, Monroe, and disappeared. I wanted Harper to grow up free from his shadow. But I always feared the day he'd find us. Somewhat condition. I slammed the diary shut, tears spilling before I realized it. The wind screamed outside, shaking the shutters. She had protected me from him, from the empire he built on her stolen work. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I answered. Harper, Mason's voice. Calm. Too calm. Dad wants to meet. Says he can explain everything. I clenched my jaw. Explain how he ruined her life? Don't be dramatic. Meet us at the boatyard, midnight. The line went dead. For a moment, I thought of ignoring it. But my mother's diary sat open on the table, her words bleeding into the paper like a promise. Don't let them take it again. So I grabbed the book, the locket key still hanging from my neck, and drove into the storm. The boatyard loomed at the edge of the pier, my father's old kingdom, now rotting with salt and neglect. The rain was relentless, slicing across the dock like shards of glass. Mason was waiting under a flickering lamp, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets. Beside him stood Robert Dawson, my father. His once black hair had turned to silver, but his eyes were still cold, calculating. "Harper," he greeted, voice as smooth as the ocean before a storm. "I hear you've been digging up ghosts." I held up the diary. "These ghosts have names, designs, proof." He smirked. "Proof of what? That your mother was ungrateful? I built her career. She'd still be a waitress if it weren't for me." My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "You stole everything she made. You left her with nothing. You destroyed her." "She destroyed herself," he snapped. "She chose pity over power. And now you're doing the same." Mason stepped forward. "Dad, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Robert barked. His glare pinned me in place. "You think you're different, Harper? You think you can bring me down with her old notebooks?" He reached out, grabbing the diary from my hands. "Let me guess, this is your big evidence? Her melodramatic rambling?" I snatched it back. "It's her truth." Lightning flashed, illuminating the fury in his eyes. "Truth is written by the winners," he hissed. And then he lunged. I stumbled backward as his hand struck the table, scattering rusted tools across the floor. Mason shouted something, but the storm drowned him out. I shoved my father's arm away, heart pounding. "Get away from me. You think you can erase me?" he roared. "You're nothing without me, just like her." I grabbed the diary and tried to run, but his hand caught my wrist. The old dock beneath us creaked under the weight of the wind and rain. "Let go!" I cried. Mason grabbed his arm. "Dad, stop!" In the chaos, my father slipped on the slick boards. His fingers clawed at the railing, then lost their grip. I screamed as he fell, a flash of motion swallowed by black water. Mason froze. "Dad." The storm swallowed his shout. We both stood there, soaked and shaking. The diary clutched against my chest like a shield. It was over in seconds, the years of secrets, of lies, of control, all dragged under by the same darkness he'd built his life on. Mason turned to me, face pale, eyes wild. You killed him." "No," I whispered. "He did that himself." He backed away, stumbling into the rain. "You'll regret this, Harper." And then he was gone. I sank to my knees, the rain washing away everything. The guilt, the fear, even the tears. The diary lay open beside me, pages rippling in the wind. On the last page, a line stood out in bold ink. "The fire that destroys can also forge. Remember that, my daughter." I pressed my forehead against the soaked paper and whispered through the storm. "I remember, Mom. I remember." Morning came gray and quiet, the sea eerily calm as if the storm had taken every sound with it. I sat in my car near the pier, watching the tide crawl over the rocks. My clothes were still damp, my hands shaking as I held Mom's diary against my chest. The police came after sunrise. Someone had reported screams during the storm. They found my father's body washed up near the docks, his face pale and almost peaceful. The officer who questioned me, Sergeant Nolan, listened in silence as I told him what happened. The argument, the fall, the chaos. He closed his notebook. "Looks like an accident. Slippery night, bad footing." I nodded numbly. It was over. The man who'd stolen everything from my mother was gone. But relief didn't feel like victory, it felt like exhaustion. When they left, I stayed there, staring at the water. Somewhere beneath that endless gray surface was the weight of my family's sins. Mason didn't come to the police station. He didn't call. He didn't even show up for the funeral we arranged 2 days later. A quiet one, with no tears, no words. I didn't expect him to. He'd made his choice when he walked away. Afterward, I drove back to the cottage on Ocean View Lane. The air inside was cold and clean, washed by the storm. Mom's sketches were still on the wall, her tools still scattered on the workbench. For the first time, I noticed how sunlight hit the glass display case, setting the jewelry aglow like trapped pieces of dawn. That's when I decided I wasn't leaving. I cleaned the house, repaired what the storm had broken, and unpacked my things. Mom had built beauty out of betrayal. I would do the same. Days passed in silence until, one afternoon, I heard the soft click of heels on the porch. I froze. The door opened, and the woman in black stepped inside, the same one from the cemetery. This time, her veil was lifted. She had kind eyes, faintly lined with age, and a gentle smile. "You kept your promise," she said. I blinked. "Who are you?" She looked around the cottage, her gaze warm. "My name's Margaret Hale. I was your mother's lawyer and her closest friend. She asked me to watch over you, from a distance, until you were ready. She reached into her coat and handed me a sealed envelope. Your mother left one last note, she said softly, for when the storm finally ends. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, was a single line. The fire that destroys can also forge. Keep creating, Harper. That's how you stay alive. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry not from pain, but from something that almost felt like peace. Weeks drifted into months, and the sea grew calmer inside me too. The cottage no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like home. I woke each morning to the sound of gulls and waves instead of phone notifications or city noise. Mom's workbench became my altar. Her sketches, her unfinished rings, the scent of clay and polish, everything she'd left behind, was a map leading me back to her. I reopened Monroe Designs under her original name, Evelyn Monroe Jewelry Studio. I didn't chase clients or money. I simply worked, crafting each piece by hand, just as she had. The first necklace I finished bore the initials E.M. in delicate engraving. When I placed it in the display case, sunlight hit the silver and filled the room with a quiet glow. Word spread faster than I expected. Locals stopped by, curious about the woman reviving the Monroe legacy. They asked questions, shared stories they'd heard about my mother, and soon, orders started coming in, small at first, then steady. I hired help women who reminded me of Mom. A single mother named Tara who'd lost her job at the diner. An older woman, Judith, whose husband had passed but still smiled like sunlight through rain. Together, we laughed, worked, and slowly brought life back to the place. One afternoon, as I was sorting invoices, a letter slid under the front door. No return address. I opened it carefully. You won, sis. I'm out of the country. Don't look for me. Mason. I read it twice. The ink was smudged, hurried. No apology, no regret, just surrender. I folded the letter and slipped it into the diary, beside my mother's last words. Then I locked it in the drawer, the same one where she had once hidden her pain. Outside, the sun dipped low, scattering gold over the waves. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, breathing in the scent of salt and lavender. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I felt anchored. Mom had built her legacy out of fire. I would keep it burning not for revenge, but for rebirth. It's been a year since the night the storm took my father, and with him, the last shadow of the life I thought I knew. The cottage now hums with quiet rhythm, the whir of tools, the laughter of women shaping beauty out of metal and memory. The world calls it Monroe Designs Reborn, but to me, it's simply home. Every piece we make carries part of her, the curve of a pendant like her smile, the shimmer of a ring like sunlight on her hair. I keep the gold locket on my neck, the one that once held the key. Inside it now rests a folded note that I wrote myself. Keep creating, Harper. That's how you stay alive. Sometimes I walk to the cemetery by the sea, a single lily in my hand. Her grave overlooks the water, the same waves that once stole so much from us but also gave us back our strength. I sit there for hours, talking to her softly about the women in the workshop, about how her designs live again, and how people finally speak her name with respect. I found everything you tried to protect me from, I whisper. And I understand why you hid it. You didn't want me to carry your pain. But now I see it wasn't pain you left me. It was purpose. The wind always answers, lifting the edge of my hair, brushing my cheek like a mother's touch. When I walk back toward the cottage, the horizon is gold with evening light. The fire in the kiln glows through the windows, steady and alive. Mom once wrote, "The fire that destroys can also forge." Now I finally know what she meant. She didn't leave me an inheritance, she left me a flame, and I'll keep it burning. For her, for me, and for every woman who's ever had to rebuild from ashes.